Testing. Yep. Thanks. Well, good morning. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We apologize for the delay, but we wanted to make sure that people had an opportunity to hear the closing of the session upstairs. So it's great to have you here. I'm Tom Kuhn, and I'll be moderating today. I am Professor Emeritus from Michigan State University and recently retired as Vice President of Agriculture at Oklahoma State University. I serve as co-chair of the board for the International Fertilizer Development Center, and it's in that capacity that I'm here today. And so we have partners with us here, all working together on a very unique and exciting program, SOILS, Space to Place. And so we're going to hear a bit more about that today as an example of innovation driving towards building resilience in smallholder production operations and throughout the African food system. So I'll begin with introductions of our panelists, and I'll just go down the row here, beginning with Dr. Varda Prasad from Kansas State University. He's a distinguished professor and the director of the Feed the Future Sustainable Intensification Innovation Lab at Kansas State University. Dr. Prasad's research focuses on understanding food, grains, crops, responses to changing environments, both temperature and water and climate change, and developing crop management strategies for efficient use of inputs. So welcome, Dr. Prasad. It's great to have you here. Next is Dr. Bram Govertz. He's the Director General of CIMMYT and the 2014 Borlaug Field Award laureate. Dr. Govertz is renowned for pioneering, implementing, and inspiring transformational changes for farmers and consumers to meet sustainable development challenges. He brings together multidisciplinary science and development teams to integrate sustainable, multi-stakeholder, and sector strategies for improved nutrition, nature conservation, and national and international resilience and food security, pretty much hitting on all of the sub-themes for this week's conference. So thank you, Dr. Govertz, and welcome. Next is Dr. Tilahun Ahmedi. He currently serves as the Director of Sustainable Farming, Climate, and Resilience for AGRA. Dr. Tilahun is a systems agronomist with profound experience in African agriculture with more than 130 publications. And before joining AGRA, Dr. Tilahun worked as a principal scientist with the CGIAR system for more than 20 years. Welcome, Dr. Tilahun. We also have online Dr. Jonathan Atkinson. There he is. All the way from Malawi. He's head of agronomy and the Farm Services Unit, through which he supervises Meridian Group's initiatives for on-farm agricultural research and development and extension with smallholder farmers, improving commercial agronomy outputs through innovation uptake, addressing farmer food security through access to inputs, and prioritizing agricultural development in Central Africa. His staff of 200 agrarian professionals work to improve soil health and crop nutrition, access to microfinance for smallholders, pest, disease, and crop management, and sustainable intensification practices for crop production. I suspect he might also walk on water occasionally with all of that going on. And then finally, our last panelist is Dr. Upendra Singh. He's the Vice President for Research at the International Fertilizer Development Center. He specializes in soil fertility and systems modeling. For more than 30 years, Dr. Singh has focused on the development and application of crop simulation models and decision support systems for agricultural research, development, and extension. It's a pleasure to have all of our panelists here with us today, and one in Malawi. And we're going to begin with Dr. Singh giving us an overview of the SOILS Space to Place program.
Thank you, Dr. Kuhn, and good afternoon, and welcome to the session. Let's begin with the first slide. I'll be giving an overview of the Space to Place project. The Space to Place project is about, thank you. The Space to Place project is about improving productivity, soil health, and fertilizer use efficiency. Fertilizer use in sub-Saharan Africa is relatively low. It's about 15 kilograms of nitrogen per hectare. And it's also one of the more expensive agri-inputs for the farmers. So therefore, it becomes critical that we do improve the fertilizer use efficiency and reduce wastage. The goal of the Space to Place project is to help bring up practical, profitable, and scale-appropriate soil and land management technologies and recommendations to improve efficiency. So that's where we are mainly focused on in terms of improving the scalability and getting recommendations that are efficient and helps improve the efficiency of resources, not just fertilizers, but other inputs as well. Again, the key targets are improving productivity, soil health, and fertilizer use efficiency. The funding for this project comes from USAID, Resilience for Environment, Food Security, Bureau for Resilience for Environment and Food Security. So that's basically a very quick overview of what the project is about. I'll take a few more minutes to describe the two major components of the project. The first one deals with the delivery of ready-to-go technologies and management practices for scaling. We are implementing this in Eastern and Southern Africa in partnership with CIMMYT, World Veg Center, Meridian, and also local NAS and seed companies. The second component of the Space to Place project or approach is the delivery of targeted fertilizer and soil health recommendations to improve fertilizer and resource use efficiency. This is the component that I'll be discussing in the next slide, and perhaps will be the major focus of our dialogue this afternoon. This is conducted in partnership with ISRIC, USDA, and recently, I should have updated this slide, we have also got FAO as part of the team, and it was just last week that with support from USAID, FAO and IFDC are working together in Zambia, helping improve, come up with new soil maps, and therefore tying up the soil map component with FAO and IFDC, looking at the decision support tools to help with the recommendations. In all of these activities, we are very, very closely linked with the local NAS, local private companies, and the idea here is to make sure that there is a sustainability. When the recommendations comes from us, there is someone on the ground to take it to the next level, whether it's a private sector or the NAS team there. This is a schematic of what the Space to Place project is all about. Here we're looking at delivery of hyper-localized or target recommendations of fertilizer and soil health practices at scale. Fertilizer recommendations generally haven't worked well. One of the reasons is because of the blanket recommendations, which are made independent of crop, soils, farm management practices, and the socioeconomic conditions. The other thing that hasn't helped with the recommendations also is when we have a poor resolution of existing soil data and so forth. The alternative to do more soil analyses, have a better extension services, etc., are not very practical in some cases because such services are not available to the farmers, or the farmers won't be able to afford it. So this is where the space to place approach comes in, where we look at from the top component of the chart, where we look at the spatial data that comes from space, climate data, soils data, GIS-related information, and tie it in with model engines, process-level simulation models, artificial intelligence or machine learning, and make recommendations at that level. That would have been normally the end of the story. But here we are trying to go to the farm and more site-specific recommendations. And this is where we go from space to place. And the place-level inputs are information that we can generate from the farm, looking at soils, soil information, the slope, the landscape positions, texture of the soil, and a few things that can be collected at the farm. And here we're not talking about just looking at texture of the soil using simple hand stickiness and all that sort of process. And the more important component also comes in here is looking at the farming history. What has the farmer been doing, what crop has been growing, and so forth. And by providing that additional input, we are able to zoom in and make that site-specific recommendation. So that's what makes this project very transformative and innovative in the sense that we are taking what we call precision agriculture to the smallholder farmer in sub-Saharan Africa, but without that heavy investment in equipment and so forth. So in essence, we are leveraging the combination of space and place level data to achieve that. And I'm just going to conclude by saying that the project also highlights the innovations that are involved, innovations in data acquisition, innovations in the modeling that's taking place, and also innovations related to the user interface, because it doesn't matter how strong the science is behind the black box, the user interface, making it more usable to the farmers and people on the ground is a very key component. And so innovation plays an important role. Partnership is the other one. We are very much dependent on partners, whether they are research, extension, or the private sector. And this is well represented in the panel here as well. And last but not least, the component related to empowerment. Bringing the empowerment to the farmers, the end users, extension agents, and the agri-input dealers, so that they are out there able to provide those recommendations that are coming out from the project. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Upendra. So maybe just to follow up a little bit on that, the theme of our conference here is harnessing change, and certainly this is using change to move forward in addressing issues with malnutrition and food insecurity. But the scalability seems to be one of the things that's most unique about this, going from the broad scale of satellite imagery down to the local producer. So what are the key attributes of the program that make it scalable? What is it that allows to go from that scheme all the way down to the 2-hectare plot that a farmer has? It's on. Yep.
All right, great. Yeah, I think in terms of scalability, the fact that we are depending on tools that are science-based, so that whatever we learn in one environment, we don't have to keep repeating that. So the process level modeling helps there. Also having a good quality data to go with that. And last but not least is the evaluation of those tools. And in terms of evaluation, and this is where I will maybe ask Dr. Tilahun to move on, but add something. But Ethiopia was our key country where we had conducted this evaluation part to ensure that scalability was possible by doing field trials, independent validations. And so I think that based on that, we were able to take this concept, and now we are trying it out in Malawi, Tanzania, Zambia, and we'll be expanding to a couple of West African countries as well. And we're doing side some additional work in Kenya, Uganda, and Mozambique to strengthen the data collection process.
Great, thank you. So Tilahun, you're a systems agronomist. In introductory comments. So what is it about, it'll work, he'll turn it up. What is it about what is it about this process that allows you to address the diversity of food systems across Africa?
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. You know, we talk about food systems, we interpret it an approach which brings nutritious food to growing population. At the same time, there's a global challenge of climate change, natural resource degradation, and biodiversity. Oh, okay. So how we really start to develop the process and the approach in space to place is that is something which really helps to address these intertwined, interconnected challenges that we need to respond to. And space to place is really about, you know, managing diversity. It's about understanding the mosaic landscapes, the mosaic needs, and making sure that whatever technology and practice we are taking is fitting into the demand, is responding to the local situation, but also in a position to tell with a certain accuracy an insurance that, again, will be achieved, a productivity gain, a nutrient and the resource use efficiency gain. And that, you know, has two components. One is about matching the inputs into the local demand, but also creating the local capacity to use it, to make sure that the local capacity is enhanced to, you know, characterize their system and make sure that they mishmash, fine-tune, and make it work for their local situations. And that needs, as Dr. Opendra said, that needs science which brings the social component, the biophysical component, of course the spatial component, but also a position over time to respond to these challenges. And I would like to state two benefits when it comes to food systems. One is really you know, the opportunity to improve productivity, nutrition, and improve resource use efficiency. When we tried it, you know, tested this, developed this approach in Ethiopia, you know, we saw a yield gain in maize, in wheat, between 25 and 75%. And the benefit was not only yield gain, a reduction in input in some cases, and a matching of a certain nutrient combination to a certain location, landscape position, soil type, and nutrient needs. But also we have seen, again, in terms of nutrient density. If you apply nutrients in degraded soils, you get very little in normal cases. But even in those soils, also yield was low. The selenium content, the zinc content of the grains of wheat, of maize, was improving. So, and we worked in Malawi with the same approach. And we, in fact, worked with health people. And at the end, we published a paper in Nature showing that, your nutritional status in most of the African countries depends on where you come from. What type of soil is essential in the system. Probably the last thing I would like to say is, its contribution to climate change and adaptation and resilience. By appreciating diversity, the demand in the Sahel is completely different from the demand in the Ethiopian highlands or in the Himalayan, degraded soils. So understanding the resources, but also understanding the adaptive capacity of those communities and what they have in the system was very helpful to improve nutrient efficiency, water use efficiency, land use efficiency, labor use efficiency. And by doing that, we're then able to contribute to decarbonization, because you halt the expansion of agricultural land into forests, wetlands, protected systems, so that we contribute to climate change adaptation and contribute to circular systems. So in totality, it's about guiding what to do where in a system and creating then the local capacity to respond to it. Thank you.
So if I could just pursue that a little bit further, so how do you build that capacity at the local level?
So there are different ways. One is, as Dr. Pendra said, helping them to understand the system dynamics, And the system dynamics, in fact, together with Queensland University, we created an African farming system map. I was part of that book. And what we did was we divided Africa into 13 distinct farming systems. Even maize-based, are not all the same. You have high-yielding, 6 months maturing, high nutrient demanding maize versus you have a dryland maize in the Rift Valley where it has 3 months of maturity period. So what do you do for these different types of maizes? And then what type of release systems should come in terms of what type of nutrients and blend should come in? And that is one. The second level is, is about really enhancing the research capacity of the national agricultural systems. CG systems are there, but CG systems cannot replace national agricultural systems. So working with national agricultural systems to build capacity, to showcase, to demonstrate, and show them, and some of the scientists are as educated as anyone else, So having the right tools and help decision making, help improved investment and targeting. So I think these are the two approaches I would like to mention.
So, but you're not having the scientists go out and speak to big groups of farmers, right?
Yes, that's a good question.
Okay.
Yeah. So what do we do? Is one of the challenges, rightly said, is a very high farmer to extension ratio in Africa. So very weak extension system. So what we do in Agra is we started to identify young people who didn't have jobs, young people who are graduated are not employed, young people who like to business, or elderly people who went back to the village and train them, give them the right extension content on this, and make sure that they also make business for living, while at the same time giving context-specific extension to farmers and their institutions. And by doing that, then we were really minimizing the farmer to extension ratio, at the same time delivering context-specific knowledge.
Great. Thank you. Thanks for putting up with my questions. So, Brahm, one of the sub themes this year is regeneration, and so I'm curious, your perspectives on what role soils space to place plays in generating or producing regenerative approaches to the food system.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And first and foremost, thanks for inviting me to the panel. Also, fantastic presentation from IFDC to see this approach. And it will be no surprise that we are working hand in hand in Tanzania, Malawi, and Zambia that on what you have heard about, the Masagro Africa project. This is all part of that. And I'm very happy that we are integrating it and coming forward towards the farmers with an integrated view. It seems like we were thinking alike. Also, if I hear the VAX strategy, I think we have talked a lot about the crop, and I think today we're going to talk about the soil component of that. Maybe some of you don't know, but I am a soil scientist of education, and I have to admit that when I was a student learning about soils, I would have never expected that 15 years later, I would be sitting in a room with the Secretary of State of the US, of all people, declaring that soil health was a matter of national and international security. And that happened a few months ago on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly in the Rockefeller Foundation building. So I think there's a bit of strong symbolism that we need to read here around that. The same Rockefeller Foundation that started the organization I represent today, CIMMYT, with a back then already strong focus on, yes, seed, but also the agronomy piece, etc. But of course, we have been learning from that. And then, of course, the significance of a top leader globally going back to soils, what probably started humanity as one of the main issues for international security. And I think the journey that also CIMMYT has been on, and that we as a society and a scientific society have been going on today, calling it regenerative. I think it puts together, and term is a term, but I think it tries to express that, yes, agriculture, we are extracting, right? We're extracting grain to eat. So it is extracting from the soil, but the question is, how do we make that an integrated system beyond the plot, beyond the plant, towards a farming system and towards a community system around that. And for me, what space to place and that regenerative concept have together is that it is not prescriptive. You are not describing a process that you have to follow step by step in order to be called that thing. So space to place is rather about, there is not one size fits all. It is about learning to read the information and put that in a conceptual framework and then take the best decisions to optimize that system. I've been asked many, many times, and we have a project with the Rockefeller Foundation on this, can you describe the regenerative agriculture? What does that mean? Which 5 things do I need to do in order to be regenerative? That's the wrong question. What are the 5 key indicators that we need to achieve in order to have a regenerative system? Now, what to do and what that concretely means, there's experts. Right. Those experts are called farmers. Farmer knows his or her soil better than anybody else. But we do have the responsibility to give the farmer the option to have data that is turned into information so that she can turn that information into decision making. And then hopefully the means are around that to implement that decision through decision taking. So for me, space to place is about that. It's about turning data into information, information into decision making, and decision making into decision taking. And each of those are different steps. That means there's learning involved. There needs to be fast learning involved. It is okay to fail as long as you don't fail around the same thing twice. And you learn from it and you incorporate it. In the center of it all, if you look at the soil component, there's carbon. We need to look how can we optimize carbon cycling in the soil. There's conservation agriculture practices to keep more of the carbon stored, but also it is about how do we optimize crop rotations in order to have maximum carbon cycling, because that carbon will work for your nitrogen, it will work for your soil fertility, it will work for the water. So we have an engine there that we need to understand. and we have looked at carbon cycling at the soil level in a very narrow way. I think if we really want to go space to place regenerative agriculture, how is that carbon cycling actually through your village? There's a carbon that turns into food, you eat the food, where's that other carbon piece? So how can we start mapping that full carbon cycle, and can we follow that carbon, and how can we make that part of the regenerative cycle in that sense? And just picking up on one question, you were saying you're not going to have scientists talking to thousands of farmers, right? Scientists usually are not the best communicators. So I strongly believe that we need to make people do better at what they're already good at. So let those scientists turn the information into scientific elements. But that means we need to equip extension workers, farm champions with that information in a palatable way for them to be the best communicators to the farmers. And that doesn't mean a scientist cannot find its real mission and become a farm advisor. It just means that it's a different function to really do that. Thanks
A different way of telling your story.
Absolutely. And it is about stories many times.
They relate. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Vara, so we've hit on a lot of the sub-themes already. Resilience is the first sub-theme of the whole conference. And so what is it about space to place that helps us build resilience into food systems from the experience that you've had working in this project?
Resilience is extremely critical and important for space to use this. Okay, yeah. Thank you. First of all, welcome to this meeting. I appreciate your time. And resilience is very important and very key for this, is an integral part of this Space to Place program. And when you look at the definition of resilience, is the ability to withstand the shock and recover from the shocks, whether the shock comes from climate, whether the shock comes from market, or the shock comes from conflict. I would like to set the resilience into two different components. One is talking about the resilience of our food system, and the second, more importantly, is the resilience of people, because those two things are extremely different. So let's talk about the resilience of the food system. When you talk about food as food system, we generally set it up as production, storage, processing, market, and consumption. That's a typical way we look at the entire food system. But I would like to preface it in a different way to fit it into the way the Space to Place program is addressing. So we need to be thinking about where our food comes from. So in that sense, there are 4 or 5 components of it. We'd like to start with soils, then go to plants, then go to animals, then go to humans, and then go to ecosystems. So these are the 5 major things which will impact the resilience of our food systems. And Place to Place is addressing specifically the first component. How can we improve the soil fertility? And when we talk about soil fertility, it is beyond the carbon, it's beyond the organic matter. It is also about soil microbiome as well. How can we improve that? Because that will link. So I truly think that healthy soils will lead to healthy plants, will lead to healthy animals, will lead to healthy people, and ultimately into healthier ecosystems. So that's a concept of broader One Health. Right now, we are missing the 2 important components, the soils and the plants. So we need to be looking at in that direction. And Space to Place is a good program which is addressing the fertilizer use efficiency, nutrient use efficiency. How are you going to include the legumes, and how are we going to include the perennial crops? That's the first component. And now let me set it up in the component of resilience of people, because it's more important that people are much more resilient to be able to make the food system resilient. So how do we make people more resilient? Number 1 is knowledge sharing and providing them with the evidence-based solutions, which every one of us were talking about. So this is about participatory approaches. First, understanding the needs of the people and delivering the information to them in an appropriate way. Basically, what Bram said was we need to really give them the options. It's not about prescription of a thing. We need to give them the options, and they're the best people to choose what's best for their agroecological and socioeconomic conditions. So that's number one. And evidence-based is number two. And then linking with the markets is very, very critical. And this program is particularly focused on that as well. How are we going to link with the markets, especially when we are talking about the indigenous crops and the crops which are much more nutritious? We need to make sure that there is enough market for them. And then consumers are actually willing to pay for that best management practices which farmers are using to make sure that the greenhouse gas emissions and the adaptation and mitigation and resilience to climate change is happening. So that's number three. And the last one, which I would like to talk about, is more about building the social capital. Because when farmers or when people are working together as a cooperatives or self-help groups, so they will be able to withstand these shocks which come from nowhere and suddenly. So it's very important that we build the social capital, give the farmers and the other organizations and the people to manage themselves and help themselves, which will be beneficial for their own lifestyle and considering their socioeconomic conditions.
So just as they make the decisions about what's the best application for their soil, for their crop, for their economic status, making sure that a community has the capacity to tackle whatever challenge comes along, that they have the confidence and the knowledge to be able to approach that and see their way through it to a better outcome.
That's right.
Thank you. Jonathan, thank you for being patient, and we appreciate your involvement here today. You bring a different perspective from the private sector, and so what we'd like for you to talk about, what is it about private sector partners like Meridian that can benefit from these collaborations, but also bring what special skills and assets do you bring to the table as a private partner in this public-private partnership?
Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks again just for accommodating me virtually. I think it's fabulous for the forum to do that. Can you guys hear me all right?
Yep, loud and clear.
Sorry. I just want to, again, reiterate on one point that was said. The concept of space to place and how we as agronomists and like Brahms, I myself am a soil scientist. I mean, the notion of bringing something from a regional or contextual granular perspective down to something to a site-specific level is not necessarily new, but what space to place does, and certainly in the context of how we as Meridian and SU see it, is that it's connecting communities. That's the thing that it's doing, right? It's meant to be collaborative and engaging. And I think that's the key differentiator from maybe some initiatives that have preceded, projects like Space to Place. There's a few things, there's a few things of interest for us as a private sector. The key thing is that obviously there's a last mile delivery that has to be taken into consideration. And a few of the panelists and my co-panelists have mentioned it, is that I didn't really appreciate myself as a scientist. I didn't really appreciate the importance of extension and extension advisory. And I've been very fortunate enough to work in Africa. I'm a South African, so most of what we develop on the technical side has to be conveyed, and we use the term, we're in the trenches all the time, because whatever you develop has to have some form of landing space. So it really is easier for Africans to find, get this balance between extension and the technical side of it. So one of the things that we as a private sector really are focusing on is what Space to Place is meant to recommend. So, what is available to the farmer in the market? What can he access through site-specific, region-specific, even crop-specific fertilizer or seed? I think it also must be understood, and I don't know if this has actually been spoken about in the forum, but I think the minute we use the concept of efficiency, it can apply across. We typically use it in terms of nutrient efficiency or agronomic efficiency. But I challenge anybody who's ever spoken to a commercial farmer, if you've ever used the word sustainability to a commercial farmer, you would never go to a commercial farm and say, how sustainable is this farm? You would say, how economically efficient are you farming? So space to place in some form and in some way is a paradigm shift for small scale farmers to understand that there is now a deepening need to move away from a subsistence model to a more commercially orientated and focused model. You're not sacrificing purpose for profit. What you actually do is you're enabling him to actually beat the poverty line himself. And so part of what we take out of a project like Space to Place is to partner with the likes of IFDC and CIMMIT and the other partners to look at how efficient and how affordable can we make these inputs that are required. And obviously, these things are typically demand driven. So if you can stretch them out across an area where you have homogeneity, or if you can stretch them across an area that has a particular crop demand, that's the other thing that we try and promote, that we will be trying to promote, is that the commodities and the value chains that farmers should be targeting should be very much market driven. I can tell you right now that if we just ignore things like post-harvest losses and the amount of revenue that is lost through that, I can tell you now there's probably about 25% of the sector, of the small-scale farmer sector, that do not have a market to land their product in. And again, that's not efficient. No farmer should be farming like that. You should not be fishing and throwing your lure in the water and hope you catch something. So space to place definitely offers that for us as a private sector. And again, with the public-private initiative that we have, it obviously then has massive roll-on and knock-on benefits to the end user, to the customer. I think I want to leave with that because I know I could end up speaking for 2 hours. But I think the important thing is that, again, being in Malawi, being in Zambia, being in Mozambique, where we have all the infrastructure that we do have, we got a really good sense of converting farmers to customers. And once you make that transition, once you take on a farmer as a customer, you lock that individual in for a support network. And again, I think that is the big message that I would challenge other private sector fertilizer, seed, and agronomy organizations to do, that you don't see them as a farmer, you see them as a customer. It's not a quantum leap to make that observation, but once you do that, you absolutely are then locked in and tied into that individual. It's like signing an agreement with them, because again, if you drop the ball, you actually end up compromising not only his livelihood, but you end up losing a potential customer. So it really is, it's about striking that balance.
Yeah. Thank you. So formalizing that relationship, you call a customer, I might call a client, but formalizing that relationship really is key to making this successful. And thanks for bringing our attention back to the markets. Ultimately, the measure is what happens in the marketplace and whether the product gets to the market, whether the consumer is able to access it and benefit from that. Telahun, how do you react?
I just wanted to follow up on what Jonathan said and also what Dr. Vera said. How do we really use the concept, the approach of space to place to address resilience? And in Agra, what really we're trying to do is, what is it for the farmer in short term, and what is it for the system in long term? So for the farmers in short term, it's about producing enough when the season is good, when opportunity is existing, so that they have money, they have food in their store, they have money in their bank. So whenever a small shock comes, the following year, they're not going beyond poverty line. And then they will have a time to recover and to adjust. And then over time, they will have the incentive to invest on their soils, on their landscapes, on the water infrastructure, and over time they build the capacity to adapt. But that short-term transition, that's also what I think Jonathan said, in terms of benefits, is the trigger to adapt to changing climates. And that is where really resilience comes in when it comes to space to place. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Jonathan, go ahead, please.
Yeah, thank you. I also just wanted to add that one of the things that really excites me about an initiative like Space to Place and a parallel initiative that I'm running with as well, with USAID, is that there is no shortage of R&D out there in terms of seed development, germplasm, even in terms of fertilizer. I'll be bold and tell the panel and tell the audience that there is pretty much nothing that we can't design. And again, not only us as an organization, I think even as a community of practice, there's very little that we would not be able to develop and design. But I don't think that's the need for an initiative like Space to Place. I think the need is to get basics right. You can't equally, and you remember, and I'm talking to the converted here, we've all worked in these environments. We are still dealing with very, very low educational levels. So when you ask me as a natural scientist, what is the biggest blockage? It's not natural science. It's the other things that complement the understanding of our natural science. So you've got to be very, very, it's like threading the needle with what you offer. You can't offer on the one hand advanced seed and advanced cropping system approaches, advanced technologies, and at the same time still try and show evidence uptake and proof of concept. So one of the things that I've done again as head of agronomy is I've made very, very sure that we keep a clear line of sight of what the objective is. If our objective is to increase productivity through farmer engagement, then there's a clear line of sight of how to do that. Get them the seed on time so they can put it in the ground on time. Get them the fertilizer and the right fertilizer on time. Give them the market to be able to sell that. Once they have that market, then train them. And that's where the microfinance comes in. Train them to become self-sufficient. These are 4 very simple, basic things. Like I said, the partners that we partner with can start bringing in all the new technology innovation and that. I do think that we tend to, as scientists and as the professional, will tend to get carried away and thinking our next solution is around the corner empirically. Unfortunately, it's not, because there's a lot of good science there, but it still has yet to get a foothold. So I wanted to leave that as well with the audience.
Thank you. Bram?
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to say that I think if we start from nutrition and resilience, that's when we automatically are going to integrate all those elements that were mentioned here. I do have to also apologize because I have to run to another meeting that I couldn't move due to the changes in the agenda. But I think this conversation for sure needs to continue with some questions from the audience.
Well, thank you for being a part of it. Thank you for staying with us as long as you could. We apologize for the change in schedule. Thank you, Bram. So, Vara, what do you think?
First, you asked about what are some of the key attributes which makes this Space to Place program very efficient and scalable, right? So it's not the lack of technologies which is an issue at this point of time. It is how do we scale them to an appropriate level so that it will have an impact on food, nutrition, and climate security, which we are talking about. The scale is very important. And how do we address that scale? And what is unique about this Space to Place program is the approach they have taken. Number one is sustainability of the program is very important. We should not treat this as a project which has an initial timeline and an end timeline. We have to make sure that there is a commitment from all the key partners. So the partnership was very key, and the approach which we took to identification of the partnership was very important. They made sure that we have a commitment from the host country governments, and Ethiopia is one of the classic example and a good example where the government of Ethiopia has really invested their time, effort, and resources on this project, make sure that they're also leveraging resources from other donors to address the objectives of this. So the approach was very important. And then when we talk about scalability, there is very little research done on scaling itself. And research on scaling is an important component, which we do not have a good understanding of that. How do we scale? How do we scale seed systems? Is it the government? Is it the private sector? Is it the farmer organization? Is it the self-help groups? So we need to really think about, categorize our technologies and look at which of the partners are efficient in that scaling process. So that's what this is trying to do, this program is trying to do, is that which of these technologies are scalable by government sector, which is by private sector, which is from the self-help groups. So that's the uniqueness of this particular program, I would say.
That's great. Thank you. So do we have an opportunity for questions from the audience? If you have a question or a comment you'd like to share. Yes, thank you. Please introduce yourself and then your question.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Sana and I'm an ag food consultant based out of India. I am also a young professional that has recently entered into international development space as well. So I just want to understand about the sustainability or the self-reliance part of these projects and initiatives that has been taken up by IFDC and even Agra, for example. So just wanted to understand on your experience and your expertise, when a project is for like 5 years or 6 years, post-project, how do you ensure sustainability that it stays, the development, the initiatives, what is aimed and envisioned in the project stays with the country forever. For example, if you're introducing a certified seed in an ecosystem, so how do you ensure that it's sustainable, like through distribution channels or something? But the initiative stays for longer, and it benefits for a longer period of time.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Who wants to go first?
Let
Go
me
ahead,
start.
Bart.
Let me start and explain that. So I think one of the most important thing is that for a country or an organization to take it from a project to a program, at the beginning of the project, it's very important to have a sustainability plan so that you're already preparing from the day one how you're going to sustain this initiation of the project by a single donor and how you're going to sustain that. That's number one. And how do you get to that is by making sure that you have the right partnership in the country and the right commitment from the people who are engaged in your project. That's